today I'm going to be making an introduction to Substance Painter. So right off the bat, we shouldn't have anything in here, and the navigations for this is just the same as Maya. So if you're familiar with the Maya navigation, you should be just fine in here. So my layout is kind of different, kind of move some things around. If if we were to have the default layout in, let me just reset this to the default layout. So I'll go to view sync preset UI. So by default, you should have something like this. But I prefer to have this plugged in here. Then this should be texture set list. Layer should be here. I don't think I have. Let me just collapse this for now. Texture set. I think this is here. This is pretty much how I use. Substance Painter. So in here we have the all means every single thing that's in here is going to be visible around here, and it's going to be arranged alphabetically. So starting from the numerical letterings in here to the alphabet. So we should have everything in here, both the alphas, grudges, procedural maps, textures, app surface, etc. So let's just dive into each and every one of them. So in this project file, you're going to be any project you kind of import into any external texture or alpha or brush you kind of import into this particular project. They're going to be visible around here. So then we have the alphas. So this is just majorly black and white textures with a shape in there, but mostly just black and white textures. That's a shape in there. So it can actually be anything, so long as black and white. You can also apply them. You can also bring them in here. I kind of use the default ones we have in here. So for the grudges, so we have more or less like a generic texture map that has variation of black from full black to full white colors in here. So we're having a tone of even gray in between here. So you just kind of picture it to understand it as full white color, then full black color, then everything in between being produced in here with some kind of shape or distorted shape in there. I don't know if you can see a preview. Let's see if we can get a preview out of this. Yes. So there are actually different types in here, but it's just a blend of or a color variation from full white to full black and then everything in between. So you can use this for virtually any particular material you want to kind of create. So we have this called bronze charcoal. So if you're going for more of a charcoal stain effect in here, you can actually use this. Grunge to kind of drive that. So we also have grunge concrete in here for concrete material. So depending on what you're trying to create, you always want to kind of come in here and then type that in here. Let's say for example now I want to create something like that to do with cracks on a wall or something. So I don't come in here and type in cracks. So we should have something in here. Let's just see if we can get the preview out of this. Okay. Now there's actually cracks called ground concrete cracks. It's more like if you take a picture of an old wall and then you kind of turn that picture in Photoshop to a black and white image. You should be having something similar to a map like so in here. So instead of doing that by yourself or taking pictures and then scanning them or bringing them into Photoshop and making them black and white and then you adjust the levels and contrast and stuff like that. In here, Substance Painter gives you, I would say, if not all, but most of the maps you need to kind of drive any kind of material you're going for. So you have that in this grunge in here. Though each particular material has its own, grunge has its own settings for it in here, has its own properties for it in here that we can actually manipulate But for now, we can't manipulate them because we're not actually using them now because there's no project kind of work with in here. So then we have procedural. This procedural is almost similar to the grunge, but more specific to some particular type of pattern. It's more or less like this one actually deals with more of a pattern like texture than just a generic randomized kind of looking texture. So here we have brick generator, we have bricks, we have camouflage, we have camo wool, we have circles, we have checker pattern, we have cell. Just clicking you have the cell two in here. So each particular one has its own property also that you can actually manipulate and then create whichever material you want to actually create. So if you can't find them in the grunge, you can also find them in these procedurals in here. And there are a ton of them, so I would implore you to kind of go in there and kind of check for whichever one you need and then you can use them for your projects. Then we have textures in here. Now, if any particular texture you kind of bring into Substance Painter will kind of also appear, will specifically appear here. So if you are bringing in a UV kind of texture map in here, they should appear here. Then we have art surface. So this particular art surface is more or less like alpha brush, but in form of a normal map RGB tone. So this particular color tone is kind of specific, for color variation, kind of specific to your normal map. So everything in here has a normal map color variation in there that kind of tells you that this is actually a normal map. So it also works like an alpha, whereas alpha works specifically for height. Let me just go back in here. This particular one works mostly for the height channel. Then the art surface are mostly normals that work mostly in the normal channel, but we'll discuss that later in a bit. So we have skin. This is a newly added part inside of Substance Painter whereby you can create different kind of skin texture and skin pores detail inside of Substance Painter. Then we have filters. This filter is more like having some kind of effects in Photoshop whereby you have your what's it called, levels, adjustments, color correction, color balance, etc. So in here there's no color balance in here, but you actually have this HSL, which is called hue, saturation, and light. It also works very well just as the hue and saturation inside of Photoshop. Then we have glow, we have color match, we have color correct. We also have bevel, we also have blur in here. We also have invert. I think levels adjustment should be here also. So we come in here and type in levels. So we have levels adjustment in here. We also have height adjustment that kind of works more or less like the levels adjustment. But there's also level adjustments in here though. They're not visible now because there's no project to actually work with in here. But just keep in mind you also have sharpening in here also. We also have the warp. Just keep in mind that they're actually in here in case you want to use them. Then we have our brushes. It should be self-explanatory. So depending on the kind of brush you want to use, you have a collection of collection of brush in here. You have a set of brush in here, whichever word you prefer to use. Particles I don't really use so much though. I don't really use so much of this, but they're also in there in case you want to use them. It's more like kind of, how would I explain this now? More like, I think we're going to use it's more like a generational tool whereby you kind of tap in a particular region and then it kind of uses a particular script to kind of more like spread out. Let me just use the word it's more or less like an infectious kind of brush whereby you kind of stamp on it and then it kind of grows around the surface in a procedural manner. Then we have tools. I don't really use this so much, but actually in there if you want to use them. The material, this particular material is actually different from smart materials. These particular materials are materials that are generated from Substance Designer, so they don't really have particular separation of layers in there, unlike these smart materials. These particular materials are just kind of one single material that just has a single property to it, without layers in between each folder. to kind of manipulate and adjust. Whereas these smart materials are kind of maps built from adding different kind of materials and creating different kind of layers and then putting them in a folder and then saving them out as a smart material. Then we have smart marks. So this smart marks is more or less like a procedural generator that kind of generates different kind of marks to kind of hide or reveal the layer underneath it. So we have different kinds in here. So whichever one you prefer to use, whether for fabric, for dirt, for rust, for wear and tear, whichever one you prefer to use, you kind of actually use them in here. Then we have our environment, self-explanatory. This is actually HDRI images that can actually use kind of light up your scene. Then we have color profile. I've not really dabbled in here though, but it's actually in there in case you want to use them. So then we have big maps. This actually works when you have a particular project in here or particular object in here you want to kind of work with. But for now, we don't have anyone in here, so I'll just leave this for now. So let's go to the file and then create a sample. Let's click on open sample. Let's bring in a sample file in here that we can work with. I would like to use this meat map, so let's double click on this. So let's just give this a moment to kind of load up. Okay, so we have a file in here now. So let me just go back and select this. Okay. So now, right off the bat, I've talked about some of this in here. So we come to projects, you can see how the generated files are in here, like I explained initially. Then we have textures also. So these textures are kind of texture map generated from this particular model. We also find them in here. Initially without putting any projects in here, they were actually empty. So now, since we have a project in here now, we can actually find them around here. Now some of these files are files that you bring externally into Substance Painter or files that are actually generated inside of Substance Painter. So if you come to texture sets, I think one particular okay, let me just bring this out. Can I put this in here? I don't think I can put this in here. Let me just drop this back in here. I prefer to have is there a way to yes. Now bring this out. I don't want to drop. No, this should be actually in here. This should be here. This should be here. This. Oh no. Let me just arrange this again to how I prefer to use it. Yes, better. So let's close that. So we should have that in here. It's actually in here now. This is how I prefer to work. You can actually adjust this based on how you prefer to use the layout. Okay, so now in the texture set, this texture set is more or less like your outliner inside of Maya. It's more or less like where you have your object in here, but the object the texture set is actually not just specifically for object itself. It's kind of for object that have a particular or a specific kind of external material to it. So if for example now in Maya you have like you kind of give this head and this hand one particular material. Let's say you give it a single material and they name that material head and hand, and then you export that file out of Maya into Substance Painter. They would appear as a single texture material in here, having the head and the hand inside one single texture set. So that's basically the explanation for that. So, but over time you kind of get and kind of understand what that actually means. So we have the head, then we have the body, then we have the base, It's more or less like using materials in external softwares to kind of separate this out as individual pieces to kind of bring them into Substance Painter, so you can actually know and identify them based on the material you have given them instead of Maya. So in here, there isn't so much to talk about in here though, except for specific reasons when you're working with the file. But if you're working with external files, you might need to come in here and then kind of create a bit for that. But I won't do that now. When we're going to talk about when we're going to import a project inside of Substance Painter, we'll talk about that. For now, let's just leave this as it is. Then if you come in here to the display settings, we can actually change the environment. For now, we can't see the environment because the environment of opacity is at 0. So if I increase this all the way up, now we can see the environment. So we can hold shift, right click and hold, hold shift, right click and hold to kind of rotate the environment. Now the environment is kind of blurred out. You can see I'm moving this, the environment setting in here is actually moving also. So alternatively, you can also come in here and then move the environment settings around, the environment rotation around actually. So let's reduce the blur for this so we can actually see the environment more properly. Okay, this is what we have. So let's take down the opacity for that. We don't see that visible in here. Alright, so then we have shadows in here. We can turn on the shadows for this. Kind of see the shadow coming from the light source. Then we can come into this environment map and actually use another type of environment in here. So you can actually kind of play with the environment settings. You can also increase the brightness of that environment. Let me just leave this back at the value of 1. Or 0 precisely. So I'm going to work with the same material that was in there before, the Tomapo Studio. Right, so yes. Now let's say for example now you bring in your model into Substance Painter. I want to kind of match the camera settings you had instead of ZBrush or instead of Maya in here. You can always do this in here with the camera settings. Let's say for example now I want to kind of change this. I'll just change this to an 85mm lens. Change this to an 85mm lens. Now we have something more or less from a portrait camera angle for the camera settings for this. So let me leave this as it is. Then we also have activate post effects. So this is just mainly kind of adding some kind of special effects to kind of post processing effects to this. You can see if I adjust this now, you can't really see much of what is happening in here though. Once you kind of start adding materials in here, it's kind of see what that actually does. But this kind of affect your overall picture quality, more like adding an effect inside of Substance Painter. So what else can we talk about in here? This for now, I don't kind of play with this though. The default is just fine. The default will just work just fine. Then come to the next setting, this shader settings. This default works just fine, except maybe you want to kind of have some kind of subsurface scattering in here, more like a skin type of texture quality in here for light passing through the object. You can actually turn this in. In here. The default seems to work just fine. So I'll leave that as it is. Then we have the history. I don't do much of this. I don't really open this anyways. This is just your log, whereby any particular thing you kind of do in here actually writes a log for it in here. So in case you're having issues or error and you want to kind of report the issue to Substance Painter customer service, you can always come in here, or look your development team, you can always come in here and copy the log and then send that to them so they can get a better understanding of the issue or error you're having instead of Substance Painter. So yeah, I think that should be all for now. Then if I go to layers in here, by default, anytime you create a new scene, you should have layers in here. So for the most part, I don't really use this layer. I prefer to work with a fill layer instead of a normal regular layer. Why? Because this particular layer in here, is not as interactive as working with a fill layer. So in here, let's kind of change this to a red color. You can see how changing this red color now is not really affecting the material until you kind of go in there and then paint on it. So now I'm actually painting with this particular layer in here. So depending on the how metallic you want that. So let's make this more metallic. So I'm going to increase this, make it more of a metal. You can see the preview in here, making it more of a metallic material to it. Then the height information, don't really want much. We need, let's increase this a bit more. Oh no. Let's put this back. No. Like so. And let's collapse this like so. Bring this up around here. So we should increase the height information for this. You can see how increasing the height information does not do anything in here until I begin to paint. So now painting now making a new stroke of paint in here now actually captures this height information we just increased in here. So we kind of increase the roughness for this now. And I kind of come in here and paint again. You can see how the roughness for this is kind of different. Why? Because I just had to change this in here and then come in here and painted in here. But for the most part, I prefer working with few layers. So let's collapse this. I come in here. Okay, so carrying on. So I create a new fill. Now to create a layer, just click on this to create a layer. But let me start from the beginning. In here, you have the effects, add generator. See now we have add levels in here. We have some effects in here, add paint, add fill, add levels. Some of these are going to talk about later on as we kind of work with the software. Then we have in here, we have add white marks, add black marks, add bitmap marks, add marks with color selection, and add marks with height combination. So this particular marks in here is more or less like your layer marks instead of Photoshop. Just keep that in mind. Whereby using a full black material, whereby using a full black marks, you're not going to be seeing anything being painted on, but a full white marks, you're going to see something being painted on in there. That is depending on the kind of brush though. So the layer marks instead of Photoshop or full black, once you paint with a white brush, using a black layer marks, you can actually paint in what's underneath it. So it kind of works the same in here also. Then we have our layers that we just talked about now. Then we have fill layer. This particular fill layer is actually different. So clicking on that now to bring that out. If you come in here and kind of change the material setup. So in here we have different kind of projection. We want to talk about this later on though. So in here we have the color. So we come in here and change the color to full red. You can see how it affects just that texture set only. The texture set is just for the head only. So everything we're doing now, every particular layer we're doing here is really affecting that texture set. So now this particular fill layer actually works in real time. Anything you adjust in here works in real time. So for example, now if I can increase this metal material, you can see I turn this into a full metallic material in real time, unlike the layers. If I increase the roughness, I take this all the way to something more reflective. Now we can actually see the environment material in here, the background from the AZRI. Okay. The normal map doesn't do much for now. The height map, we increase this now. You won't see much happening until we come in here and right click and hold. In here. You can have other options in here. The same options you have around here, you should also see them around here too. So let's say we add a full black, add a black marks. You can see how that completely erases everything. Then we'll come to the brushes in here. Let's choose an interesting brush. This, let me type in death. Let's use a death brush for this. You also have crack brush. Let's try this. Double click on this crack brush. You can increase the brush size with the open and with the bracket keys. So we come in here, spray something around here. You can see how it's kind of applying, kind of using the material, the color underneath it. The reason why it's not very obvious is because this particular brush is not in full white, That's why it's not showing it completely. It's more or less in like a grayish value. So that's why it has a variation of grayish value in there. But if we should use something like a default brush in here, let's use this basic card. I will draw something around there. You can see how this takes the full color in there. So you can see how we can kind of use some of these brushes in here. It's kind of add variation to our texture and it's kind of make it look more interesting. So let's say we kind of add the white maps. Let's see, we're adding a white maps in here. Oh, before we do that, let's say I want to kind of erase what I've done in here. Just hit X on the keyboard. You can see it's on full black. Just hit X on the keyboard, change this to white. You can paint this in here. So hit X on the keyboard again to change this to black, and we can actually erase all of this as we want to. You can see I also capture that height information in there. It's capturing that height information in there. I'll come back to this same fill layer. I can also reduce the height information to the negative value. You can see this kind of digs into the material. Or put this at 0 just to make it on the surface. Just put it on the surface. Right. So then let's do something more interesting in here. So let's say we use white now. You can see that reviews everything. Then with your brush setting, so with your brush, by using this basic art brush, still on black, you can paint out. Hit X, you can paint in back. Okay. So let's say we're going to make this a bit more interesting. So let's kind of delete this, remove these marks, and let's come into the base color and come into this procedural texture and then just add this, drag and drop this brick in here. So adding this brick in here now. So adding this brick in here. Begin to adjust this in here. Let's adjust the scale for this. You can see how adjusting the scale actually creates some kind of effect in here. Some kind of effect in here. So I can see how this particular brick generator also has some settings around in here also. So come down to pattern. You can also manipulate the X value for this, the Y value for this. You can add some bevel to it, bevel smoothness to it if you want to. You can also rotate this texture. You can see how it's kind of, okay, let me just put this to a value of 5. Okay, let's try a value of 3 instead. You can actually see this properly. You can see how this rotates the texture. You can see how this does an offset in the X value, Y value. Let's just zero that out. The projection. Now it's a UV projection because it's going to project on this. It's going to project this kind of procedural texture on the UVs. So you're going to be using the UVs like some kind of mapping. How do I explain this now? Some kind of let's say for example now you're kind of wrapping a flat wrapper on a circular shape. So based on the shape of that object, the map will kind of deform it, the wrapper kind of deform itself, kind of wrap around that shape. So that's basically what this UV progression actually means. So it's using the UV to kind of map out this particular procedural texture around it. We change this to triplanar mapping. So this kind of ignore the UVs in here and kind of map this in a more random fashion. So this particular one actually helps in kind of ignoring the UVs and then kind of ignoring the UV scenes and then doing a proper job to kind of hide our seam lines around here, around the model, to kind of give us a more appealing result. I change this to plain now. Instead of apply this in more plainer surface. But this particular one won't work very well because this particular model is not completely flat. This planar projection actually works better in a more flatter surface. But this circular projection kind of work very well for this because this particular object looks more like a circular shape to it. Just keeping in mind that they're actually in there. I don't really use this often though. This filtering and UV wrap, I don't use that often. But for the most part, this should not repeat. Just leave that as default because should work just fine for the most part. So let's try different kind of material in here. So let's try this BW spots in here. You can see how it changes everything. But a more interesting way is kind of use this. So also keep in mind that let me undo this. Let's click onto this. Let's put this on red. Also keep in mind that depending on where you kind of drag any of these black and white textures to, that they're actually going to affect that particular channel. If you drag this to the metallic channel, that will kind of affect the metallic channel more. Then we can also come in here and adjust this. So you notice that some of this material now has a kind of metallic property to it, while others do not have that kind of metallic property to it. You just kind of break the uniformity of the metallic channel in here. So I'll do that and I'll drag this to the roughness channel. You can see how some part of this is rough, some part of this is not rough. You can see this in here. You come in here and kind of adjust the contrast for this. Now let's say for example we want to kind of visualize how the max is affecting this properly. If you hit the C key on the keyboard, it's kind of move two different channels. Now this is the height channel, this is the normal map plus height plus mesh channel, this is the base color channel, this is the metallic channel, this is the roughness channel. Now because we added this particular procedural texture to the roughness channel, that is why we can actually see the material actually on this particular object more precisely. So now we're kind of visualizing only the roughness channel because we added this particular material to the roughness channel, we can actually see this. If we have to kind of close this, now say this is back to the normal default value, whereby full white means, now to go back to your preview mode, just click the M key on the keyboard. So full white means completely rough, and full black means completely reflective. So if you click on the C on the keyboard again several times, to go back to the roughness channel, you can see it's on full black because here also is on full black. Once you have a material in there, that changes it to this. Okay, so keeping that in mind. Same also if we M on the keyboard. Same also if we drag this to the height channel. This black and white value will not work on the normal map channel. Normal map channel needs the normal map color values in there, like I showed you guys in here in the house of it needs this same color value in here to actually work. But I'm still going to show you guys how to use it though. So now we are working with the procedural. You can also apply the grunge also to any of these channels to still also work apart from the normal map channel, because normal map channel needs to work with the normal map color values to work accurately. So now for the height channel, you can see how this is affecting the height channel. Okay, so let's say we want to add some more interesting variation to this. We can just come to the roughness channel and then apply a different kind of texture to it. Let's go to the grunge and just drag this grunge depth and apply this to the roughness channel. You can see how this adds another variation to it. You can see how this makes it look more interesting. This particular one actually works more for a stone-like, kind of a stone-like material, or more like a mold kind of material in here. So let's say we want to kind of use the same material we used initially. So let's go to the procedure and drag this BW in here to the roughness. Then scroll down and use the same value we have in here for this balance. So I'll copy this value. Now paste this in here. So we're kind of matching it one to one. You can see how I'm matching this one to one. Okay, so this is how you kind of have some variation in here as much as you want. Let's say for example now you want to kind of do something a bit more specific. So let's just delete this. Let's delete this. You can also invert the material if you want to, whichever one works for you. You in Substance Painter, all you have to do is just kind of play with the settings in here until you have something more towards your desired, towards your end goal for the particular reference you're using. So let's delete this. Let's create something new in here. Okay. So okay. Let's say we want to do something a bit more precise in here. So I'm going to add the black marks. Now these black marks, I'll right click on it. I'm going to add a fill layer to this. So this is more or less like adding another fill layer, like a stack of fill layer inside this original fill layer. It's kind of confusing, but let's just add this and then I'll show you guys how to kind of manipulate it. Let's say for example now you want to kind of have the, let's say we give this a red material. It's actually on full red. The reason why it's not showing full red is because on this fill layer is in a center value. So if you push this towards the black value, it's more or less like a max. It's no longer visible. You push this to the red to the white value, that's completely visible. So now the idea now is to, okay, let's say we want to kind of control only the color channel. So I'm going to turn up everything else. But you don't want the color channel to be showing full red all over the entire surface. You want to kind of control areas where you want it to be showing on. Initially, when we kind of drag this in here, you can see how the color changes, but we don't want the color to change. We actually want to have the red, but we want to have the red showing in specific regions based on a particular max. Based on this particular texture we're using, this procedural texture we're using in here. So go back to the fill layer. Then we'll just drag and drop this into this grayscale value. So you can see how this kind of uses the grayscale texture variation in here to kind of drive where is visible and where is not, and where the red is not very visible. So we come in here and adjust the contrast. We have something a bit different. So this is how we kind of manipulate and kind of get some interesting result out of this. Okay. So we can also use this also to kind of drive. Let's select the red again. You can also use it to kind of drive the roughness channel also. So let me just leave that on red again. So now we have the color channel and the roughness channel actually visible. So now if you come into the roughness channel, let's zoom in here. I'm kind of push this towards the black. You can see how only the part that is actually red catches that full reflection in there. It's not very visible, but let's just select this marks and select the BW, B&W spots. Let's adjust this. Let's increase this like so. Get more contrast in here. You can see how only the part that is actually red catches the full reflection for this. You can see how this works. That's like a general idea to kind of manipulate each and every channel from this. Let's turn off the color channel and turn on the height channel and come in here and you can manipulate the intensity for that. So now it's on a full reflection. Then we also have some height information in there. Then you can see how it's kind of making just that part that has the height information and the roughness information more reflective. Okay. So let's delete this. So now if you come in here to, this is actually our smart marks. Sorry, not our smart, this is actually materials rather. So you can use some default materials in here. We can use, let's try, you have a creature kind of material in here. You can see how based on this, you can see how it's affecting this. So if you come in here, This particular material, this one actually comes with this particular one shows the smart material and the regular materials. Let me just delete this. But before I actually delete this, because this is actually a smart material, we open this folder, you can see how we have different set of few layers inside of them, with different max value in there, and different fill layer also in there to kind of manipulate, just as I just explained. This is one way of kind of working with Substance Painter. Close this now. Let's say we come in here to material. Let's say come here to also a normal regular material, and we drag this browse pure in here. You can see how this affects this differently. Let's turn off this base layer. Let's turn off this picture sitting here. You can see how this affects. We click on that particular material in here now. You can see how there isn't much happening here. It's more or less like a normal regular fill layer. So let's try this concrete B in there. Turn off this base brush. You can see how this particular one has some settings attached to it that we can actually manipulate the hue however we want. Saturation also give us a slightly different result to it. So that's basically how you kind of use that. So let's say for example now, let's say we want to kind of use let's drag this browse on top of this, turn it on. Another thing you need to keep in mind is that once you kind of drag your materials in here, they kind of overlap and then kind of appear on top of themselves. So don't edit that too much. So let's select this and drag this in here down below. And let's drag this on top like so. So let's say we don't want this gold to be appearing in the entire material. We can actually use these smart marks to kind of drive that. So before you use that, you can always kind of make sure you can either drag and drop in there, or you can create a black mask to kind of drag and drop that into the black mask. Let's start by just dragging. Let's look for something let's look for rust. Let's look for rust. Let's try this rust brand and drag and drop this in here. You can see how this automatically creates a mask in here, and also add a fill layer in here. But this fill layer now is actually different because it's more like a generator, whereby it's more like a procedural kind of marks that we can actually manipulate. So it has different settings in here, as you can see in here. So we can increase the global balance with this, or we can reduce the global balance. We can increase it all the way up. Scroll down, you also have some other settings you can also adjust in here, giving us different kind of effects. So each particular smart mask comes with that variation in there for you to actually manipulate and get more interesting results to it. You can also decide to put this in a folder. Let's say you click this particular icon in here, this folder icon in here, or Ctrl G to create a folder out of this. Then in this folder also, you can also create a mask in this folder, black mark in this folder. You can do whatever you want to do. Just like you can create a fill layer on top of this mark, so you can also do the same thing also on this folder that has a mask in there. So that's more or less like basically everything, like the general tools you can use in here. For your brush also, let's say we go back to the brush, because also on this mask you can go back to the brush. Let's use a depth brush. Let's use depth 3 or this dots in here. You can change the flow for this, just like we have instead of Photoshop. Stroke opacity, the opacity of the brush, the spacing for the brush, size. So we come in here also, down here in the properties also, you should also see the same thing in here. You can see we have similar settings to that of Photoshop. Size of the brush. If I increase the size of the brush now, we also have the flow. We also have the minimum flow, stroke opacity, spacing. If I increase the spacing, you can see the preview in here. If I come in here and begin to, it's actually affecting this, but it's not very visible. Let's use a stronger brush. You can see this actually applying in here. Now it's not showing very well because the spacing is just way too much. So Let's reduce the spacing for this. Then we can paint around this. Okay. You can reduce the size, increase the size, whichever way you want to kind of use this brush. You can actually use this in here. Hit X on the keyboard to kind of erase that. So this is like basically most of the tools you should be using instead of Substance Painter. That's kind of more like a repetition, adding layers, adding layer mask, adding different kind of materials, creating your own materials, manipulating them until you have your final desired results in here. So then let's say you want to kind of export out your texture. You can come in here, export textures. Oh, one more thing also, if you come in here to this texture set, you can actually up-res this. You can actually go to a higher resolution for this. For the most part, 2K should work just fine, but if you want to be more precise, you want to kind of see more precise, higher resolution of what you're actually working on in here. And this particular one is actually specific to the particular texture set, so keep that in mind. So each texture set will have its own settings for this. Come in here and we can increase this to 4K resolution preview. Instead of preview this in 4K quality, so you can preview this in 4K quality. It's kind of loading up down here. So now we have this in 4K resolution. So we can also actually render this out. So let's select this particular material in here. We can actually render this out. You can also visualize this in 3D or 2D view. Come in here, this is our 2D view. In 2D view, it kind of shows you the UV layout for this, but you can't actually manipulate this UV layout. So for the most part, you'll be working in the 3D view. Then we have the perspective and orthographic view. So depending on what you want to actually use, anyone will work just fine. Then we have the free rotation or constrained rotation. By default, it's on constrained location. On its own constrained rotation. But put this on free rotation, you should have this rotating in a slightly different manner. So whichever one you prefer to use is completely fine. Then we click on this, we can actually render this out now. Clicking on this. So this is going to be using the Iray render. So if you have an NVIDIA graphics card in here, it's going to be rendering this out with Iray. So you can come in here and increase the time limit to have a better, cleaner result. Also come in here and work with the resolution in here. You can increase the resolution here to a more cleaner quality out of this. You can also come in here and change the background color. So you can also turn off this background and then let's visualize the AGRI at the back. This kind of shows us the AGRI at the background. You can also change the AGRI also if you want to. The same settings also like previously explained. Shadow intensity, you can increase that. You want the shadow to be shown below, however way you want it to be. Activate post process, activate post effects. Come in here, you can see how this is adding some kind of lens play to this. So let's change this to bloom. Let's change this to something else. Lens play. So if we increase this, you can see how this is adding something in here. Okay, so you can actually kind of work with some of this and then create some interesting results for your final render. And once you want to kind of render this out, just click on this save icon, then you specify a folder you want to kind of actually save that into. Also, you also have your camera settings in here too. If you want to activate the software capturing, you can also do that also. So to go out of this, we can just come in here and click on this camera icon again to go out of it. This is more like a generalized way of kind of explaining Substance Painter. So let's come back in here and just turn this off. Okay. So think that would be like basically generally everything I was supposed to, except for one thing though, So we come to this marks again, select this marks, we can actually activate this tool now. Selecting this tool, this particular one gives you a more specific way of kind of creating some selections around this. So we have the, what's this even called? Triangle fill. So this kind of selects triangles in here. So actually creating, kind of adding back this layer of this layer we have in here. So if we use this, it's called the polygon fill. This is polygon fill now. So actually painting this on each polygon, actually bringing this out on each polygon. You can see how it's affecting this. Then we have the object fill. So this object fill actually means this entire object as a whole. So I'm making this affect this entire object. So if I undo that, make this affect this entire object as a whole. Then we have the UV chunk fill. So selecting this now, we can select each individual UVs. So this also works in a black and white value also. So on full black, we can subtract this from this. You can see how we kind of subtracted all these UVs. So on full white, you can actually add and select just this UV only. These are kind of various ways of kind of making more precise selection if you don't want to kind of start painting by hand regions where you want it to be. So you can actually do work a bit faster by using some of these selections in here with the full white to full black value. Right, so we can also turn on symmetry in here. We can also turn on symmetry in here so that when we go back and use our brushes, when we go back to use our brush, let's say I'm using this artistic brush, you can also kind of paint symmetrically in here. The brush is not yet selected. Oh yeah, we have to come back in here and click on this brush icon so you can paint this symmetrically. Let's see how we can manipulate this symmetrically. Okay, so that's how we kind of work with Substance Painter. So in later lessons, we kind of create some more specific or work with some more specific project for this. By working with this, you kind of understand the steps to kind of working with this so you don't get confused or get lost. So thank you.